to the official podcast of FCS Fans Nation with your hosts Kylor Neal, Matthew Frazee, and Jamie Williams.
FCS Fans Nation. In case you weren't paying attention, the punching bag of the Big Sky made the punching bag of the Pac-12 their little word I'm not allowed to say this week. Congratulations, NAU, defeating the Arizona Wildcats, another Fear the FCS moment. And welcome to the FCS Fans Nation podcast on Facebook, YouTube, any podcast platform. Our background tonight, if you are on YouTube, is the Lumberjacks as they took down the Arizona Wildcats. Congratulations on showing up and representing. And Mr. Kylor Neal, who normally is always throwing trash at that NAU team, give him some props, my man, as we kick off our podcast here going into week 4. Give him some props.
Well, you know, being a former Arizona resident, no lost love with the Wildcats. I'm not a big Wildcat fan. So it was kind of cool seeing NAU, who, you know, the last few years, when they haven't played like a UTEP, has just been getting destroyed by the Power Fives in state schools. So this was really cool to see that redemption, trying to show people, nope, maybe we do belong here. We had a rough 2 weeks against Sam Houston, and, you know, South Dakota. It looked like their season was going downhill and downhill fast. Least expected Power 5 upset probably of the maybe of the whole season so far. I didn't see this happening at all, even though Arizona doesn't look great. NAU did not look good at all, and they pulled off a wonderful upset. So yeah, I mean, props to NAU. I think we're all going to root for, you know, FCS teams over FBS just because it's cool to see. So it's one of those things where we will have a little bit of group pride whenever that does happen. So no bashing NAU this podcast. They did a hell of a job. Yeah, we're all excited for you guys. And Casey Everett, I hope you're still celebrating. I hope you're still having a good time. That's one of those wins that you need to live up. So congrats, my friend.
Oh, yeah. Casey's not sober at all. It hasn't been since. Yep. Champagne's still going. Well deserved. We're not sober ever on this podcast, so we've got our drinks tonight. Mr. Jamie Williams, are you ready to get this podcast rolling after a phenomenal week 3 and an exciting victory week 3 for you and your Dukes?
Yeah, it was a good game. You know, the game wasn't as close as the score, but, you know, we were held in there in the first half. You know, turning point is definitely that fumble, scoop and score by Josh Surratt. You know, it took what could have been a 10-10 or 10-6 game, made it 17-3, and we never looked back. Dominated the second half, backed off in the last 6 minutes, but very good win. It's what I was hoping to see. So should help down the road. Let's get it going.
Yeah, let's get it going, guys. We're going to roll right into the Big 7, the top 7 topics of the FCS. We got some phenomenal questions to guide us as we kick this podcast. Let's do it, gents.
The top 7 FCS topics of the week. This is the Big 7.
Mr. Williams, kicking it right off with that victory for the Dukes is our number 1 question of the top 7 of the week. Starting from Mr. Bruce Edmiston, an awesome Gamecocks fan. He has been very vocal on the page how he believes Weber State is overrated, and he starts us with that question. He says, can we finally all agree that Weber is an overrated team? Alrighty, gents, time to jump into this one. So not only will we take this time to answer that question about Weber, but we'll also take it to discuss that Dukes-Weber State game, which was our game of the week last week, with JMU coming out on top in a crushing defensive fashion. So, Jamie, answer Mr. Edmondson's question. Is Weber overrated? And give us some more in-depth thoughts about that matchup.
Yeah, I don't think it's a real clear-cut, is Weber overrated? Are they going to finish a lot lower than the initial polls said they were? I think so, yeah. I mean, injuries, the offense isn't able to move the ball at all, really. I mean, they did a little bit last night when they could kind of get number 16 going. Josh Davis got going a little bit. So they've got some talent there, but they're a mess at the quarterback position. Randall Johnson, sorry, he was not good. Took them too long to make the changes. Are they overrated? Yeah, I guess they probably are if you want to compare where they are or where they'll finish to where they started. I mean, I think they probably lose 2 or 3 more games. And they're going to be a bubble team, unfortunately. It was a costly game for the Dukes, too, though. I mean, it was a great win. I was really excited for the team to get out there, but Kylor Black, that didn't look too good with his knee. Azanama went out, came back. Antoine Wells looked hobbled. Scott Bracey was on the sideline within a sling. Bye week couldn't come at a better time for the Dukes, but 3-0 with a big win and 4 more tough games coming. Couldn't ask for much more than what we saw at the beginning of that second half. Those 2 drives just went down the field and kind of choked it away. Cole's numbers aren't big. I mean, you can see them up there on the screen, but they were efficient again. And offensive line that a lot of people were worried about opened up a lot of holes. 3 freshmen on that offensive line, but you wouldn't be able to tell. Kept Cole pretty clean, kept a good pocket, gave running lanes for the running backs. I don't have a whole lot to complain about as far as the Dukes. The officiating both ways, not good. Ball spots, not good. The announcers, not good. Hot mics, very good.
Hey, hot mics were legit. Those were awesome. That was the highlight of the game.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, is Weber, I think they're going to lose to Davis this week. I think if Barron is not back, that this number 16 is their quarterback. But they still got Montana State. I think they play Eastern. I don't know if they have Montana, but it's going to be a tough road for them. I'd like to see them bounce back. I'd like to see them make playoffs. Just seemed like a real good fan base, just a team that you can like and root for. But I think we went in there and James Madison handled their business.
I don't know if overrated is the right term, though. Exactly where they're supposed to be might be the right term. Sure, what are they in the FCS stats poll right now? I think they were number 9. But if you're number 9, that means you're literally a quarterfinal or right outside of a quarterfinal team. And Weber State in 2017, 2018, 2019 with semifinals. They've made it to the quarterfinals at least those 3 seasons. And the spring, I predicted them to lose to Southern Illinois. It was not hot on them at all. That was more of a last-second loss. But, they would have been, because there were 16 teams in the playoffs, if they hadn't lost last second, they're a top 8 team in the playoffs in the spring. So, do we think the Weber State Wildcats have any chance to win a national championship? No, absolutely not. Do you put them in Tier 1? No, absolutely not. But overrated would mean you believe those things, maybe. You believe that the media was hyping them to that point or people were talking about that. When, in my opinion, we've just always kind of viewed Weber in that quarterfinals. Maybe they could get an upset, a good draw, hit that semifinal range. But I don't think anybody's picking them to be a Frisco team. We'll see how the rest of it plays out. I just think James Madison, NDSU, SDSU, Weber's likely going to get beat that bad. Just the way it's going to play out. But I don't know if overrated is the right term. I think they're exactly where they are. They weren't ever going to be the James Madison this year. But maybe they've got a shot to at least make a quarterfinal run. So am I right on that, or do I kind of sound crazy, and are they going to fall off the wagon wheels here?
I mean, when Barron was injured in the last week's game, and I already wasn't high on Weber in this game. I thought it was a style mismatch. And then, Barron's gone. I'm like, whew, maybe this is even going to be an uglier game than I anticipated. I think I predicted like a 38-13 type of game. So Weber actually exceeded my expectations of what they were going to do against James Madison. I mean, one of those big plays from their backup quarterback, Johnson, he tripped on the 1-yard line, and James Madison returned for a 99 touchdown. The game was 10-3 right there. Weber, if they were able to punch it in there right there, it's 10-10. I mean, that could have changed maybe the game, because that's where there was a giant momentum swing. I mean, that just is a gut punch. That type of a momentum swing can just change the whole course of the game. So like we all said, we weren't anticipating Weber to win. Most of us were anticipating Weber to lose by 2-3 touchdowns, something like that. So in a sense, they actually did a little bit better than what I imagined them to. So I don't think you can complain too much. Johnson, their backup quarterback, didn't look good. And then, like Jamie just said, maybe they just found the next guy if Barron's not going to be healthy in the next couple weeks, because they have a fairly tough couple games coming up. UC Davis is this week. UC Davis looks extremely tough. So I don't think it's fair to say Weber's overrated. They're still going to be ranked in the top 14, something like that. Most likely. They're still most likely going to be a playoff team. I think I only see maybe 2 more losses on the whole schedule. So 8-3 or 7-3 versus the FCS gets you in the playoffs when you're in the Big Sky, Missouri Valley, CAA. So I don't know how you can say they're overrated. Like you said, Matt, none of us thought they were title contenders.
Yeah, I think that's the misconception.
Yeah,
right? Nobody's saying they're going to win it all.
Yeah, and we put them in the top 10 in preseason because at the end of the day, they are potentially a top 10 team. It just happens that they played one of the top 3-4 teams in the nation. And it's a style mismatch. And guess what? I'd like to see James Madison play every single FCS team. If this is the outcome 37-24 and you're saying this is overrated, 120 something teams are overrated. I mean, it is what it is, because that's what James Madison is going to make a majority, if not all of their teams in this regular season look like.
Yeah, and I've said from the beginning, I think you guys will echo things like this. I only think there's 4 or 5 teams that could win a title this year, and that's it. So overrated. Remember, quarterfinals means you are a top 8 team. So if Weber gets to the second round to quarterfinals, it's top 16 to top 8 team in the nation. And that's kind of maybe number 9. So yes, on face value, they were overrated maybe for number 9, but we'll see kind of how those playoffs play out. So, and kudos to the Dukes. It just looked different. Like when they lined up and the camera was like, here's the Dukes offense and here's the Weber defense. I saw the size and I was like, oh boy, this is going to be gross, because it was glaring and obvious that there was a difference between these two squads.
What's pretty crazy is the similarity in actual offensive yards. I didn't think Weber had it in him, even in overtime versus James Madison, because of the depth of James Madison. The fact that they were within just 50 total yards of each other. Now I get, like Jamie said, some of it, the score and the stats are not indicative of how close or how far apart the game was, right? There's different things in games where the stat board will make it look like it's closer than the other. But the fact Weber, and we always trash on their offense, they still got 300 and something yards against James Madison, who we think is an elite defense. Hats off to Weber. I think they did better than they should have. So yeah, I'm actually pretty happy for Weber.
Yeah, Weber honestly kind of showed what we thought, and the Dukes did what we thought too, because the Dukes can win a national championship this year. There's no debate. I mean, they're one of the top 5 teams in the country, if not top 3. So Dukes have got a shot. But we're also curious about teams like Weber who are in that quarterfinal, maybe semifinal comparison. And one of those, my friends, is Eastern Washington, a team Kylor Neal knows very well. And Mr. Garrett Meyer, a great NDSU fan out there, says, how prepared is Eastern Washington for the Big Sky competition? The offense can obviously play, but a terrible Western Illinois team made the defense look awful. So Eastern 3-0, big start to the season, looking like a playoff contender. What do you think there, Mr. Neal, for your Eagles? And also, Garrett, I said Bison fan. I'm pretty sure you are. If you're a Jackrabbits fan, you can call me out on the page. So I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure you're Bison. Kylor, go ahead, my man. Your Eastern Washington Eagles with a very high-scoring dub.
Yeah, this was a basketball game. I mean, this wasn't a football game. This was a basketball game. There's a lot of positives and negatives to take away from this Eastern Washington team. I mean, right now, they look like they could be one of the best, if not the best, offensive team in the nation. I mean, what they were able to do in a quarter and a half is what it took Montana. What it would have taken Montana 5 quarters to do. So, I mean, that's kind of the difference, because we are talking about Montana as an elite offense. Now, the flip side, the defense. There's a couple different aspects of this game. We started very slow. Western Illinois, it seems like, is a bring your own kind of energy game. We looked lethargic. We looked slow. We just looked like deer in the headlights to start the game. Then we got in a rhythm, and we started absolutely murdering them, shutting them down defensively. And then what happens is, like Eastern Washington's done throughout the last few years, especially on the road, and especially in areas where we're not used to this 90-degree weather, 100% humidity type of game. You start to see Eastern Washington's defense start to collapse. You see them cramping up. You see them getting IV. I just don't think the defensive when they're dealing with those types of environments, I don't think we have the depth to keep flowing through some of this humidity. I mean, it seems like our guys, they're going to be out there. They're the ones who are playing. And if you're cramping up, you're still going to be playing. I mean, that's kind of the unfortunate thing. Eric Berrier had to leave for a couple sessions because he was cramping up. We had to get him some IV in the third quarter. So I don't know if this is a conditioning thing. The good news is we're not going to see this type of humidity the rest of the season. We saw this in Jacksonville State, and the same thing happened. Eastern was absolutely dominating them, and then they collapsed. And when you collapse because you are extremely tired, you can't do anything. And that's where Western Illinois was able to 100% capitalize. The good news is Eastern Washington looks so good for 2.5 quarters that we could look that bad and still get a win. I mean, that's kind of one of the positives from it. You can look that awful and still get a win because of how good you at least played through 2 quarters. So overall, I don't think we're ever going to have to worry about a game in the Big Sky being this type of scoring again, because good news is, besides UC Davis, all of our tough games are at home. We seem to have a different type of energy at home. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's things to take away. There's coaching schemings. But I think the bulk of it is in that type of environment, in that type of humidity, I don't think we either have the conditioning for it or the depth to continue to rotate and maybe let guys rest up a little bit so then they can get in the fourth quarter, because that's where Eastern has kind of fallen apart a majority of the last few years. It's been the fourth quarter. I don't know if it's conditioning, depth, or whatnot, but we look really good against a lot of great teams. And then it's just at the end, hopefully we've done enough in the first 3 quarters to kind of at least secure a win. So we may see some of that in the Big Sky. I have no clue, but a lot of positives, a lot of negatives, and we'll just have to wait and see.
First things first, Garrett Meyer is a Jackrabbits fan. So Garrett, you can call me out on the page because I had to Google him on Facebook quick. I'm like, crap, I butchered that one. Kylor, do you think, and Jamie, do you guys think, is Eastern Washington in for the spring treatment in the playoffs? Do you think that will happen again, where some team can just come in, basically just run the ball, control the clock? If they can slow down the offense to keep them under 20, will the defense be the downfall for Eastern Washington, as has been the stereotypical Eastern Washington label for many years? What do you think? Is that the case? Because you got to have a little pause for concern, or is it all those other factors? What are we dealing with?
I mean, right now, they've shown they're prepared for the Big Sky because they can outscore anybody if they need to. But I don't expect that Eastern Washington's going to allow 56 points again either. I mean, I
hope not.
They better not.
Yeah, that's
I know Western Illinois is terrible, but they're also not a team that Eastern sees all the time, and not a location they play in all the time. You know, they've seen all the rest of their schedule. They've seen them all. So styles, everybody knows how everybody else plays. They've seen it. They've played against it. But the one thing that Eastern Washington has that none of those other teams on their schedule have is Eric Berrier. And he's a difference maker. And when he caught fire yesterday, it didn't matter. I mean, he was ready to score 60 points. I think, you know, if something had happened and he needed another touchdown, he probably would have let him down the field and gotten another one. I think once you get into Big Sky play and get on the Inferno, they're prepared. They're ready to go. They might drop a game or two, but I mean, they've got an 18-game home winning streak. That's second in the nation to, I believe it's to JMU's 19, if I counted ours right. So it's not like Montana's just going to come in there with their good defense, which they have, and just run it over. They're going to have to fight. And Eastern's going to be there all season. They're ready to go in the Big Sky. That's what they've got left. They'll get a little tune up with Southern Utah, and then let's see what they got.
Yeah, that schedule's brutal, man. I mean, Montana comes to you. I mean, you get some home games. Weber comes to you guys. Montana State comes to you guys, and then it's here on the YouTube screen. Obviously, you're traveling then to UC Davis. Those are 4 really tough matchups, and some of those, Weber especially, you know, they're ground and pound and play tough defense. Yeah, final thoughts, Kylor, as Eastern enters Big Sky play, man.
I mean, it's hard when you're just comparing what the teams looked like the week before, who they played. I don't think we got a good indication of really everyone and their ability in the Big Sky besides maybe a Weber. We only saw one Big Sky team play somewhat that is a playoff caliber team, I would say, in the preseason, if you will, at a conference. But like the difference, Montana versus Western Illinois. Western Illinois travel to Montana. No Missouri Valley team really does that good in Montana to begin with. They have a great track record of beating pretty much every Missouri Valley team. And then you look at the first half, it was a very competitive game with Western Illinois and Montana. The difference maker was Western Illinois was gassed in the second half. Montana started bullying them and capitalizing. We were doing the same thing until we started cramping and falling. And I just don't know if it's the conditioning, like I said. I mean, the good thing is the Big Sky is going to be pretty chilly most of the year. We go to UC Davis down in November. It's not going to be that warm in Northern California. So I don't think we're going to have to be huffing and puffing as much. So hopefully our guys last a little bit, but I don't know if we need to, prep up that conditioning. So again, I'm not as worried as maybe some people think. Also because I've been around this types of Eastern Washington teams, even some of our most successful ones, where we're giving up 50, we're winning 52 to 51 against people who are just bubble teams and stuff like that. And that's on the road. It happens. I'm not that worried. If you are an Eastern Washington fan, sometimes these are just those types of games you expect. We've done the same thing with Portland State. NAU was horrible a few years back. We beat them 70-38 in the same type of a thing. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It just happens.
Yep.
It's not good though. But
no, it's not good. But let's
yeah.
not overthink week 3, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Eastern will be fine. It should be interesting. They're in a really good position right now with an FBS win to find themselves in the playoffs, guys. Speaking of a team that we seem to always talk about in the playoffs, in or out, bye weeks, a red jersey team, Jacksonville State coming up with the victory after their huge Florida State win, followed it up with a very close game with North Alabama, a rival, a team they call Tuna, I believe. And Mr. Brandon Owens from Cocky Nation has a question for us, guys. Jacksonville State's backup quarterback looked great. Should Matthew Caldwell get more playing time? And give us your overall reactions to a close game with UNA. His comment also includes some people are criticizing the way JSU played when they didn't change a thing from that Florida State game. Jamie, I want to toss this one to you right away, my man, because you, all through spring season and other times have talked about the quarterback position with Jacksonville State. What was your impression of the Gamecocks in a close matchup? And what do you think about the QB situation, my man?
It's always going to be a toss-up sometimes when you play a rival. It doesn't matter what the split between the teams are. They haven't played each other in, I think it's been a few years because North Alabama just moved up. So the rivalry kind of stems back to the D2 days. So they're starting to renew it. I don't take much stock into that. Caldwell played well, but I still think as much as I criticize Zerrick Cooper, he's still the better option there. But what do I think of Jacksonville State? I think, guess what? That was Jacksonville State. They do what you don't think they're going to do. They're a very inconsistent team, and you never know what they're going to do. This team might not lose another game this year. They might lose 6 games. You don't know what to get from Jacksonville State, and there's a lot of talent there. They were within a couple plays of losing that game, and all the momentum from the win over Florida State goes out the door. I know they've got Kennesaw coming up in a couple weeks. Like Kennesaw, they're getting healthy. They look pretty good against Wofford. They still play Jacksonville State still plays Central Arkansas. They still play Sam Houston. There's a lot of runway left on this season, and I think Jacksonville State's just Jacksonville State. Should Caldwell get more playing time? I don't think so. If Cooper's healthy, they look like right now. They look like a playoff team. They look like a seeded team, maybe. And in 2 weeks, they might look like a team that needs to buy tickets to watch playoff games just like the rest of us. I just don't know. I don't know what to make of them. But that's Jacksonville State.
Honestly, isn't that the case? Like, it just seems the past couple of years, and Jacksonville State fans will be the first ones to talk to you about discipline and Coach Grass and everything. And what's the Katy Perry song? You're up and you're down, or you're high and you're low. She's singing about everything where that relationship is just a roller coaster. And that's what Jacksonville State really is. I mean, who gets murdered by an FBS team, a non-Power 5, and then goes and beats Florida State, and then to Tuna, as they would call it, they barely get the victory out of there. I mean, Jacksonville State is so up and down. They're hard to predict. But I think you have to stick with Cooper. Like if you've got something great with Matthew Caldwell moving forward, as you can see here on the screen, a 6'4", 195-pound freshman who's just learning the system, developing within it. He's not a transfer guy, which is pretty cool. I think you got to stick with your hot hand with Cooper unless things just completely fall off the rails and you want to see what you have out of Caldwell. So U.S. sold on Jacksonville State moving forward. Kylor with Caldwell, or should they stick with Cooper?
I think if they're playing Caldwell, they're not going to beat any of the top tier teams in the WAC, probably even the top 4 or the WAC Sun, if you will. I don't think he looked exquisite. I mean, I don't understand it. When you look at his yards per pass, it's 5.2. That puts him in the bottom tier of, teams in the FCS. He barely was above 50%. He didn't have a touchdown, passing. He threw a pick. Jacksonville State, they won this game because there's 2 great defensive plays. They got a 100-yard return, basically a fumble return touchdown, and then they got a big pick 6. Other than that, I mean, I don't think he looked as amazing as what people are thinking. I mean, I don't understand that aspect. Now, yes, he's a backup. He's not supposed to look that good. He did what he was supposed to do, and that's win a game. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't fault him. He came in there. He did what he was supposed to do. But you're not going to have a shot with him to go through the WAC Sun over a Zarek Cooper. Zarek Cooper is definitely the much better option. But yeah, like close reactions to this game. It is a rivalry game. Sometimes these things happen. It's going to be close. And you did have your backup quarterback in, kind of your backup to the backup quarterback because, Webb's not there as well. So, I mean, overall, for a third string quarterback, he won the game. That's all you can ask for. But I would not say he looked great or he should be getting any more play time. He should be only getting play time if he's the only option. Let him mature, let him start to read defenses, give him a few years, let him learn because Cooper is a very good quarterback. He just sometimes doesn't make the decisions he needs to, but no one's ever doubting his talent and his arm. Yeah, if you were saying, hey, Kylor, here's $100, put one on a quarterback that would give Jacksonville State the better opportunity. Zarek Cooper 100% of the time. I'll put my whole house on it over him for now, but maybe in a few years, yeah, maybe this guy's going to show some promise, but he's not there yet. So use him as your last option. Do not give him more playing time unless you're up by 40 points. So maybe he can learn some things. Or if you're down by 40 points, then who cares? But yeah, Zarek Cooper, 100% the better option. This guy did not look that great, but he won you the game, and that's really all that matters. That's all you can ask for a third-string quarterback.
Yep, that's what you want, right?
Yeah, Brandon, buddy, level off. It's not as bad as UAB. It's not as great as Florida State. Level off. Your heart will help. Will appreciate it.
Right.
Be okay. Just take each game for what it is, brother.
Win's a win. Win's a win.
Check it off and move on.
Absolutely. And that's what a good backup does. A good backup in the NFL, going way up to the highest level, will win you 1 or 2 games while the other QB rests. And you see what you got. Not every program gets a Mark Gronowski at freshman or a Trey Lance just comes in there. Yeah, Barry
after Gage gets injured.
No, not everybody gets it. So give him some time. He'll be a good guy. So, all right, guys, moving on. We're just hitting all the big names of the FCS on this podcast. And Mr. Seth Meyer gets us going into the next one. He says, I couldn't watch the game. Thanks a lot, Flow Sports. You suck. Flow Sports is the worst. It is the streaming service of the CAA. It's their television deal. Disgusting. I didn't pay for it, proudly, but I got many texts from people who I said, don't pay for it. They still tried to pay for it, and they were like, this was the worst thing I've ever done. They could have just burned $12.50. So, but Mr. Seth Meyer couldn't watch the game. So did NDSU truly look as impressive as most fans are saying online, particularly Quincy Patterson? There's a lot more excitement and confidence coming out of Bison Nation right now than there was at the beginning of the season. So the NDSU Bison coming up with a 35-7 victory over Towson, ironically the same score as their 2013 title game against Towson. So what are our thoughts about NDSU? Kylor, I want to start it off with you, my man, because just what are you thinking about the Bison? I think you were the one who had them number 1 to start the year, didn't you? You went out on that ledge, right?
Yeah, I put them number 1 in the preseason. And then, of course, I wanted to see what's going on now. I put them at about 5. But I think really the top 5 is interchangeable. It just depends on who right now you believe a little bit more, or you're basing off resume, you're basing off prediction. I did not watch this game. So this is one of those things. This is definitely the game. I didn't even watch highlights. At least some of the games you can watch highlights, or you can go back on some of the apps and watch a replay if you want. This one, I don't pay for Flow Sports, unfortunately. So the only thing I can talk about is the stat lines, and I don't know how accurate that is. When you're looking at the stat lines defensively, they did everything they needed to do, but the quarterback play doesn't amaze me. It looks like they had one big play from Christian Watson, which of course you put him on a streak. Eventually in a game, you're going to get it. And it was just so happened that it was right off the bat because he is one of the faster players in the FCS. So guess what? You got 63 yards or something like that out of him. Other than that, it just looked like NDSU was doing enough to get the job done. The quarterback play didn't look, at least on the stat board, again, this is all just stat lines. He didn't look like he did amazing. I heard a couple of people say, oh, why would you make that throw? So I'm guessing that one pick was horrible. But again, I have no clue because it's just the stat lines. I mean, NDSU is just a better, bigger, more physical team. I think we all thought they would win this game. Towson doesn't look that great. But it looks like Quincy was able to do what he needed to do, kind of just like Jacksonville State's backup, but this is the starter. So, yeah, I don't know. Again, I didn't watch it. I can't tell you too much.
Yeah,
Quincy. It was just like Quincy hasn't been asked to do a whole lot, but when he's done what he's been asked to do. 6 out of 11 is not great. I mean, it was at 54.5%. But scroll down a little bit and you'll see why it doesn't matter. Ganella, Williams, Bussey, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Lipke, Sproles, Patterson, for the 300 and some yards rushing, NDSU has the Rams are back. I mean, they took a lot of heat in the spring. The Rams are back, and as this is just an outsider, I don't know why Jalen Bussey doesn't get more carries. That dude is good.
Lightning. Yeah,
he's good. The interception that Quincy threw was not good. But also NDSU fans, couple of points. One, it's not Trey Lance. It's not Easton Stick. I know you're spoiled by your NFL caliber quarterback, so maybe Quincy becomes one. Right now, I'm not sure that he is one, but he's got plenty of time to develop. He's young. Number two, it's impressive that you've only allowed 13 points, but the teams you've played, we thought Albany was going to be better. They stink. Valpo, not good. Towson, I don't think they're very good, and they didn't play. And that's not to discount anything. I mean, North Dakota State has hammered people, but business is about to pick up in the next 2 weeks. So I think we need to ask this question about Quincy and the outlook of this team after the next 2 weeks, because it's at North Dakota and against Northern Iowa, I believe. So that's what you're going to see, a couple of really solid tests that if Quincy passes those and with flying colors, like it looks like he could potentially do, and the offense just keeps rolling downhill. See you in Frisco.
Yeah, with NDSU, I think this is my good comparison when I saw this question is like the spring season, you're out in the ocean and it's just rocky waves. And you can see these giant waves coming. And giant waves are like Zeb Nolan's ability to pass, an offensive line that's starting basically true freshmen because of injury, a defense that needs a lot of growth and experience. Josh Hayes is a grad transfer, and just these waves are crashing against you. And the waters are just calmed because now NDSU seems like NDSU again. Like that young defense got a lot of good experience in the spring. They are more vicious than I've seen in a long time. The depth is there. The quarterback play is back in a stable position, and they're running the ball efficiently. So NDSU is just back in that top 5 mode where you would be like, oh, okay, sweet. NDSU football has a chance to win a national title if you're a Bison fan. Once again, Jamie's spot on. Level of competition matters. These aren't great teams you're playing against, but if you look at NDSU after out of conference and you're like, they're averaging 42.3 points per game, giving up 4.3 points per game, that's not too bad. They're giving up 44 rushing yards a game, and they've ran for 1,045 yards. So they're doing exactly what NDSU wants to do. Quincy Patterson, everyone talked about his passing. He's at 68% passing right now. Only 3 touchdowns and a pick. And the pick was a Trey Lance play, basically, and a Wentz play. Famous NDSU play where the tight end's just wide open, coming right over the middle in a short pass, and Quincy just didn't make a good throw. So like a pass you've seen score 1,000 times, and oh no, a redshirt sophomore quarterback didn't make the right pass. Darn. NDSU fans are just so spoiled. I would just say that NDSU is just back to where you would be like, oh, they won the national championship. Shocker. Not like they're going to have a tough hill to climb. We'll see what they look like against UND and UNI. That's a great call, Jamie. And then more importantly, in my opinion, in SDSU, which we'll see the first week in November. So any last thoughts on the Bison? The Bison fans should be very excited. I think you're in that top 5 tier of teams. Would you guys agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. The top 5 are interchangeable. Just depends on what you value most.
Absolutely. And it's not like, style matters, right? Style matters. And we'll see how these top 5, top 10 teams collide into each other to really get an idea of things. So speaking of getting an idea of things, Mr. Williams, your CAA is quite interesting. And that's why I wanted to include Mr. Hall Jones' question here. Mr. Jones asks, how would you rank and order the CAA after week 3? And where does Richmond fit in? I know you love the Spiders, Mr. Williams. They are your favorite team, as you gave them such a compliment last week. So what's the CAA doing for you right now? How do you feel about it? What do you think going into conference play, how this thing's going to play out?
Yeah, I think we've been able to learn a lot about the CAA over the first few weeks, actually. I think you bait and switch me. I think Hall asked about Rhode Island, but we'll talk about Richmond and Rhode Island. But that's okay. So there's 12 teams in the CAA, and I think you easily just split them in half. I mean, and it's haves and have-nots, and you can tell early. The haves are JMU, Delaware, Villanova, Richmond, New Hampshire, and shockingly, the 6th one is Rhode Island. Kasim Hill looks like the real deal. And the other 6 teams are the bottom, and it's a chasm between the top 6 and the bottom 6 this year. Usually you'd see somebody that looks like they might be able to jump up and compete, like a Stony Brook or a Towson that says, oh, we might fight for that bottom. And I just don't see it there. But those top 6 teams, I'm thinking there's probably 4 playoff bids. Richmond yesterday, they fell behind 13-0 at half. And 2.5 minutes into the third quarter, it was 14-13. They went on a 24-0 run, made it 24-13. You figure, oh, Richmond's kind of right of the ship. And the next thing you know, Villanova stormed back to win 37-24 or 34-24, whatever it was. So lost opportunity for Richmond. They do get James Madison at home in their stadium. They're not selling single-game tickets to that one game because they know we'd buy them all up. But, yeah, the CAA is looking like it's going to be a top-heavy league. And, James Madison looks like the best team there. But I think the second best team is probably Villanova.
Nova, huh?
Yeah.
Over Delaware?
Yeah. The difference there being Villanova's defense is suffocating. They turn you over. They stop the run. They look a lot like James Madison's defense. That is going to be a tough game on October the 9th. That's our next home game. But
hasn't Nova though been like all this offense and no defense, or have I misread them the last couple seasons? It seems like they are just high scoring. I know they lost to Sela in the playoffs by that big old margin.
What happens to Villanova always happens. It's an injury bug. But Christian Benford is a beast. Forrest Ryan, their linebacker, he's great. I think, and the front four get home, they stop the run. It's very much like the JMU defense of how they play aggressive. So it's going to be a good game. I'll be there. But Delaware, I think they're still a playoff team, but they're not as good as you think they are. I think that offense is struggling just a little bit, and the defense is a little bit leakier than you'd like them to be, but they're still a good team. I think I've kind of rattled on. Where does Rhode Island fit in there? They're going to have to beat some teams. They look good so far. I think they're like I said, they're in the top half. They are playing better defense, but I still think they're probably a year away from really competing. But they're going to give some teams some fits, that's for sure.
You know what would be smart? Just put 6 or 5 CAA teams in the playoffs. That way we'll know exactly how they stack and how good they are. That has worked really well. If we take one conference and we just put like half the conference in the playoff field. I think we should do that. Work
We
well
should.
in the spring for the Missouri Valley. Kylor, how do you see the TAA shaking up a little bit as we move into conference play, my man?
I mean, I haven't done a deep dive into all their individual schedules because it seems like, the CAA the last few years have started kind of beating themselves up. And they still look to be a top 3 conference from everything I've seen, but the CAA is so weird to kind of figure out outside of James Madison going across country. I mean, the CAA is doing what the CAA has done the last few years or pretty much all decade. In the out-of-conference schedule, since they're so close to a lot of really bad conferences, they get to kind of pad their records. I mean, we saw Richmond play Lehigh in what was it? Another horrible team. We saw Villanova play Lehigh and Bucknell, another horrible stuff. James Madison outside of Weber played really bad teams. Delaware doing the same thing. And even, they played Rutgers, an FBS program. But other than that, it hasn't been the type of competition where we can really validate anyone. It is just what the CAA does because of their geography footprint. They're allowed to get these teams to get better home field games or more home field games, I guess, because you're going to want all these teams to come to you most of the time. So it's just hard to validate the CAA in a negative or positive way until you see what they can start doing against each other. Just because it is such a soft or padded out of conference overall for the most part. And then, of course, you have your Towson who's trying to get some good games, but the top tier of the CAA, it looks like they could be really good or they could just be a little soft compared to the competition. We just don't know. But I think what Jamie said, those are your 6 top teams pretty much. I think they will run through most of the conference and then they'll battle each other. CAA most likely getting anywhere from 3 to 5 teams like they will every single year. I don't think anything that Jamie said is out of the line or unrealistic to think of because the CAA is still a top 3 conference. Plus, they have a national title contender. Delaware has looked good the last few years. Villanova, they always seem to kind of fall out when it comes towards the end of the season. They haven't been that same type of program maybe in the past. But then you always have this surprise CAA team that no one's really thought of, and then they come up, shoot up the rankings. This could be Rhode Island this year, like Jamie was saying. Rhode Island could be that main team from a couple years ago, or Towson from a few years back where they just sprout up after 2 years and then now they're back down to the bottom. So the CAA is just hard to really give an honest depiction of because of who they're playing. Bucknell, Lehigh, they did what they're supposed to do. If you're a good program like a lot of the CAA has, you're supposed to dominate those ones, and you dominated those programs. You did what you're supposed to do. So I'd like to see what they look like versus JMU, versus Delaware, all of these other teams. So then I can actually start getting a real honest assessment on, all right, this team, they look pretty good. Because those are at least some of the familiar teams that we've seen go far in the postseason the last few years. They're the national, not maybe national title contenders, but they're playoff contenders. And then James Madison is a national title contender. So I want to see what the CAA looks like versus the top tier. And that's really only when I'm going to be able to give an honest feedback and go, yeah, CAA looks good. Rhode Island, yeah, they look good. I just have no clue.
Should be fun to see how the CAA plays out. We're going to get a lot of questions answered in real life instead of our hypothetical guesses here, guys. It's going to be fun to see as we move forward. Final 2 questions here, guys, on our Big 7 before into our quick hits. And Mr. Keel Wilson, who's a great James Madison fan, met him down in Frisco in 2019. He wants to know, name any teams that have benefited the most from the spring season. I'll just ask everybody individually to give me a team they feel like has benefited the most. I'll kick it off here. Seems like maybe a cop-out, but I think it's not because nobody's really paying attention to Southern Illinois. So I'll go with Southern Illinois for benefiting the most because they kind of got their taste. They got their taste for blood, their taste for the playoffs. Everybody thought Southern Illinois was going to be really good after they were the team in 2019 everybody thought got shafted in not making the playoffs. When in reality, they had played a D2 team and there were other factors involved, but they were like that fringe popular pick for 2020. And then COVID happened. And then going into the spring season, they have a really good year. And at the rankings at the time of this recording, they're number 8 right now. And they're looking exactly like who they are. They're a strong-willed team. They're very physical, a lot of good physical runners in there. And they got their taste of playing South Dakota State in the playoffs, seeing what a true championship Frisco team is like. They almost beat them last year in the spring. They avoid NDSU in the scheduling this year. So I think Southern Illinois getting that taste and not just having like one shot to have their year, bringing all that depth back, I think that's huge for them. So I'll go with Southern Illinois as a benefited team from the spring season. Mr. Williams, you got one for me, my man. What do you think?
Yeah, I got two for different reasons, and I do love your Southern Illinois answer.
Thanks, buddy.
Welcome. So I'm going to stay on for one of mine. I'm going to stay in the Valley with Missouri State, just to get a spring season under the belt in Petrino's system, get a little experience there. I think they benefited from that, to make them a lot better team. On the opposite end of benefit, I'm going to say Delaware, because take out what Delaware did in the spring. Are they the number 6 team? Probably not. They're probably 14, 15 in the polls, but they had a great spring and they benefited from that. They're seeing the benefit because they're still in the conversation for, are they one of the top 8 or 9 teams in the country? They might be, but otherwise, I think, where's Delaware been the last 5 years outside of the spring? 14 to 18, losing in the first round. So take it two teams, 2 different reasons as to why they benefited.
Cool. Like those. Kylor, my man, you got a team that has benefited from the spring?
Yeah, I think a majority of the teams have. I mean, look at the FBS upsets right now, but I'll go specifically, and I will say UC Davis. The reason for that is in 2018, they were a quarterfinal team. I mean, they looked like they would have been able to handle Maine too. How they played Eastern. Eastern barely escaped with the victory, which we went to the national title game and ultimately lost to NDSU. Then 2019, UC Davis probably had the toughest schedule in the nation. They played all the top tier Big Sky teams. They played NDSU and they gave NDSU a battle in 2019. NDSU was the national champs. Then they went in the spring. They went 3-2. But the cool thing is Jake Meyer. I mean, if you've ever listened to the Big Sky podcast, that's what everyone calls him. But it's Jake Meyer. He was their stud who kind of went under Dan Hawkins, kind of elevated UC Davis to a level we've never seen them play in. And I know I've been calling him a sleeping giant for a long time. Well, this new kid, Hunter Rodriguez, he came in the spring, kind of, trying to replace Jake. And everyone's like, how are you going to replace Jake? Maybe UC Davis's best quarterback they've had in a very long time. He looks phenomenal. So, he got live reps. He got 5 games, which also means he didn't have to go deep into the season. Maybe he's a little more rested, but still got the playing time, still got to develop some of these bonds with their players. He looks like he has full control over this UC Davis offense. UC Davis looks phenomenal. I mean, overall, they look like a team that can give anyone in the FCS right now fits. We'll see what they look like versus Weber. But through their first 3 games, Hunter Rodriguez looks amazing. He looks like he is every set of, Jake Meyer. He looks like he's going to elevate the program. Yeah, if my team who's going to benefit the most, I think it's UC Davis. They got the experience. They got some actual lifetime reps, and it's showing this fall.
And he's got that mustache, dude.
He's got the mustache. Best mustache in the FCS.
Got that swag. Nothing better than that. I think those are some really solid examples, guys. So a lot of teams benefiting from the spring, getting that depth, and we're all going to be making a run to see who will make it to Frisco. Speaking of Frisco, this is how we think the CAA will play out. Who benefited from the spring season? How does this team look? Screw it. Peter Mooney with the final question all the way to the end. He wants no fence riding, guys. It's been 3 weeks, so we should know this answer, okay? Who is the number 1 team in all of the FCS? That's it. Tonight's the night. Declare it. Let's figure out who is number 1. So, say no does anyone disagree with the statement that most of us here believe there's 5 teams that could win it? SDSU, NDSU, JMU, Montana's that fringe one some of us may disagree on, but Sam Houston as well. Is there anybody else we're kind of missing in that mix?
Lehigh.
Lehigh. How did they make the playoffs in 2016? No,
exactly.
So of those top 5 teams, maybe there's a dark horse involved that makes it. Those are the 5 that most people in this crew and on our page believe could win it all. Who do you think is the number 1 team where you're just like, dang, that is the squad? Jamie, you seem pretty confident. You got a head nod going on. What do you got, man? Who's number 1?
Okay, so who's number 1 right now? I think it's South Dakota State. They just look like they're a machine. I know they haven't actually played an FCS team yet, but I will tell you, and you can roll this back in a few weeks. If JMU gets through October the 23rd unbeaten, it's 4 more games. they're number one. Period. Because it's going to be probably all ranked teams or at least receiving vote teams, and 4 of those on the road. I mean, you get that far and they're unbeaten. James Madison's the number 1 team at that point. But right now, South Dakota State.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to predict because everybody is judging NDSU and SDSU off a hypothetical scenario in the first week of November. Like, we're all going to just reserve until that point. I think it's, oh God,
just do it.
It's hard for me not to say. I kind of do want to go with James Madison, and I'm not super sold on Cignetti and Cole Johnson as, like, you know, top dogs, and I know I get a little heat for that, but it's tough not to go JMU, especially if they end up at home and then they'll bring a big crowd to Frisco. I think right now it is James Madison. I was very impressed with what I saw at Weber yesterday. I love the size. I do think Cole Johnson has taken that. He's not as much of a threat in the running game, but I think he has taken a DiNucci style of jump. You know, he wasn't as bad as DiNucci was in that 2018 campaign where JMU was just real bad, but I think he's gone up enough to where they could get to Frisco under him, and he could be a reason why they're there. So, you know what? I'll go with, if you had to put a gun to my head right now, I'll go with James Madison right now as my number 1 team. And that's not to take anything away from Sam Houston, who I keep putting number 1 in the polls because I still think they're a great squad. But I'll go with JMU right now. Kylor, what do you think, man?
I just don't want to pick one of the obvious answers of the top 5 because it's so boring. So sorry, I'm going to answer this question a little bit different. I'm excluding the top 5, Peter Mooney. I don't care.
What?
I don't care because
Oh,
it's such a boring answer. We're all going to have the same thing. James Madison, South Dakota State, North Dakota State, Sam Houston. All depends on who's. It all depends on who's going to get home. Yeah, it all depends on who's going to get home field advantage at the end of the day through the playoffs. So I don't know, and it looks like we're going to have a couple undefeated teams potentially. So you know what? I'm not answering this question. I'm just going to go outside of those 5. Which one has a better chance to defeat one of these 5 teams? And right now, I'm going back to my sleeping giant. I'm going UC Davis.
Damn, you love UC Davis. You love that.
They've looked the part on offense. They looked the part on defense. They out-physicaled Tulsa, who, if you just watch the last 2 weeks, Tulsa was very competitive with Oklahoma State. They were also very competitive with Ohio State until the last few, minutes. I think UC Davis, for outside of that top 5, that is the obvious answer because, yes, one of those top 5 is probably going to win. I think if we all had a bet, it's going to be one of those top 5 teams, but I don't want to pick one of them because it's not fun and screw all those teams. So I'm going to go with the sleeping giant who could buy all of our FCS teams today and merge them all together and say, you know what, James Madison, you're going to play Montana because I'm going to purchase the actual FCS championship. We're going to purchase a bowl game. I'm going with the rich daddy on campus, UC Davis.
Jamie, is this guy crazy or what? Is he crazy?
No. I mean, UC Davis is that next team on the fringe. I mean, I agree. He's not wrong. UC Davis looks really good.
And they got a great coach, Dan Hawkins.
Yep, because this is Division I football, not a murals.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, so there you go. Number 1 team.
Yes, South Dakota State. South Dakota State at the end of the day looks the best.
Watch that share, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's too good. Too good. A few laughs there to end our top 7 topics of the FCS for the week.
I'm really just sucking up to UC Davis so they buy Eastern Washington a new football stadium. That is the goal. Hey, UC Davis, help us out. We'll help you out. Maybe we'll actually let you win a game this time.
Kylor, use that name, image, and likeness as much as you want, buddy, to get that stadium paid for. That's the way to do it. All right, guys, plenty of time spent on some phenomenal questions. Thanks to everybody for posting them. Let's roll into some of the quick hitters, our quick hit questions of the week.
Just because your question is answered quickly doesn't mean we don't care. These are the quick hit questions of the week.
All right, guys, kicking it off here with Mr. Amos Fawcett. Love this question. With the recent FCS over FBS upsets, will we see more FCS draft picks this year? This one is unique to me because I'm going to be curious. I really wanted to throw this one to Kylor because you kind of really have some good rationale when these heartfelt questions get asked. But I will say this just for a little bit of evidence maybe is I did hear a lot with Trey Lance and Carson Wentz's draft process about how they upset Iowa State. Like, he would have played Oregon. The FBS games do get mentioned a lot. Do you think that may lead to more draft picks of FCS players? What do you think there, Mr. Kylor Neal?
I mean, it never hurts. Those are your games you're getting the most exposure from, right? But I mean, I think just more the obvious answer. I hope we just get more draft picks than we've got the last 2 years. They've been like historic FCS lows. One thing I think that helps is this free year of eligibility. You have these guys who have an extra year. They're more mature. They are more experienced. They should be getting some more looks in this upcoming NFL draft. But I mean, yeah, FCS over FBS upsets always help with the national exposure. Sometimes those are the only games where you're actually going to have some type of NFL executive or some type of recruiter sitting in one of your games or actually watching your games, besides just some highlight tapes that it doesn't really show much. They actually see how you can play throughout a whole game. So yeah, yes, but I also don't think this is the only reason why we're going to have more or draft picks. I think it's just time. We need to have more draft picks. The reason why it was so low was because this weird spring season. I mean, if you were not opting out of the spring season, it's probably because you weren't on a draft radar anyway. And then if you were on a draft radar, well, you decided to play in the spring, and then maybe that just affected the way you can train for a combine. You're going to do all this stuff. So extra year of eligibility, sure. Some more exposure helps. More experienced players. I do think we will see draft picks, and I think it's going to be because of a combination of reasons.
Cool. So let's hope more FCS players hit that draft board. 7 rounds of the NFL draft in April. Guys, Mr. Greg Talent wants to know, was Chattanooga's close loss to SEC Kentucky more due to the home team sleepwalking, or are the Mocs starting to live up to the preseason hype? I think the Mocs are starting to come alive from where they were in the spring season. However, I think they have a tough road ahead, and I was big on Chattanooga going in. I still think they can have a successful season, could still be a playoff team, but it's kind of hard to predict this because we're so sold right now on where their conference is at. I mean, we're going to know a lot starting in October. They're going to VMI, and then East Tennessee State, who's kind of got the hot hand, is coming to them on October 16th. And then 2 weeks later, they're going to play Furman, who's also playing pretty well right now. So I don't know if I can really answer this right now. I will say I think they're going to start playing up to their potential, but will their potential be good enough with a conference that is much improved? Time will tell. Mr. Jamie Williams, Dustin Helton here, the Rev, wants to know, should the OVC and Southland teams merge and form one conference? Brandon Owens also mentioning about Austin P now going over to the A-Sun. What do you think, my man? Should those remaining ones kind of come together and resolve the issues as these conferences fall apart?
Yeah, I feel like I said that way back when we first started talking about the WAC and the A-Sun and who was going to each one, because you knew the A-Sun needed one more team. And it wound up being Austin P. We thought it was probably going to be a team from the OVC or potentially the Southland, and it was. And there's just not much left between those teams, and I think they need to merge because I think you're going to have 6 teams left each way, if maybe a few more in the Southland. They should. I thought that was what I said I thought should happen way back. It's not going to be a good conference, but they should merge. I think
the Ohio Southern Valley land, it's just right there. It's perfect. It's just a beautiful name. Yeah, perfect abbreviation. Throw it together. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that followed is, as realignment's big in the FBS, FCS. Could be chaotic at this point. So Rev, let us know what the name of that conference should be. And I'm going to go right back to you, Jamie, for our final 2 questions here. One of these, where would you draw the lines for your Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 teams in the top 25 from Mr. Jacob Martinez? You are a Stats Top 25 voter. Tell me what you think, my man. Where's your Tier 1, Tier 2, and 3 right now if you were going off the Stats Top 25?
Well, I think we can all agree that Tier 1 are your first 5 teams. We've been talking about it for the last few weeks. It's South Dakota State, Sam Houston, James Madison, North Dakota State, Montana. So the question then becomes, how big is Tier 2? So you figure Southern Illinois, UC Davis, Montana State, Eastern Washington, Delaware, Weber, North Dakota, Villanova, East Tennessee State, Jacksonville State, Northern Iowa, Southeast Louisiana. Is Tier 2 that big, or does the tier split somewhere in the middle there? I don't know that I'm real sure about that. We keep talking about October. I think once we get to mid-October, we'll really see that start to kind of even out, and we'll figure out what that second tier is, because it could be a large second tier. So, because to me, the first tier is who could potentially play in Frisco, and then the second tier is who's probably a quarterfinal team that might be able to sneak into the semifinals, and all those other teams I mentioned probably have that type of potential. Most of them, some of them might not. So that's where you start to shed into that third tier, and then you've got the other teams that are just looking to be in a playoff team. I think it's a great question, but I think we can pretty much right now say the top tier is those 5, with teams like Southern Illinois and UC Davis probably knocking at the door. So they lead your second tier on down with some of the other teams I named.
Cool. I like that description. Well done, my man. We love seeing your stats top 25 vote every week, and then we love yelling at you on social media about it. It's a lot of fun.
I'm okay with that.
Mr. Kylor Neal, last one here from Mr. Drew Stevens, outstanding listener to the show. He had a few questions, but I really wanted to break down into this main one here. Which 3 top 10 teams are playing the most balanced football on both sides of the ball, and why, as we hit conference play coming up here? So top 10 teams, who's the most balanced there, Mr. Neal?
I think you have to go with, South Dakota State, James Madison, Montana even. If I had to just pick, 3 teams off the bat, those are the 3 teams that I think are the most balanced on terms of defense and offense. They can beat you any way that they want to. That's at least what it seems like right now. But I mean, there's a couple other ones. I like what Southern Illinois is looking like. I like what UC Davis is doing. I like what North Dakota State's doing. I think there's a lot of teams that are super balanced this year where maybe we haven't had that type of balance in the last 8. Maybe that's why our tier 1 is much larger than it used to be with only 2 teams. Maybe that's why our tier 2 is much larger than it used to be with maybe 3 teams. So I don't know. There's a lot of teams right now that have some good balance. But again, when you're looking at a lot of these teams, we don't have a good sample size due to the type of competition. A lot of people are doing what the CAA is doing and trying to get easy body bag games in to kind of pad the season, because it looks like some of the conferences are going to be so tough. But yeah, South Dakota State, James Madison, Montana, if I had to just pick 3 right off the bat, they look to be the most balanced. But again, Sam Houston State, Southern Illinois, North Dakota State, UC Davis, they all look super balanced, and they could beat you wherever they want to.
Very exciting. It is going to come down to the wire. And from a Bison perspective, from what I'm hearing up here in Fargo, we are very excited because we feel like this is a team that can win the championship, but it feels like the FCS has caught up. So lots of really good, strong, and balanced teams out there. This is going to be a fun fall season, guys. Speaking of fun, we've got a fun matchup today for our game of the week as we roll in to week 4 of the FCS schedule.
This is the matchup you should be paying attention to. This is the FCS Fans Nation Game of the Week.
There is my very poorly done wrestling announcer voice. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Maybe they'll put me in the ring on the next UFC fight. We'll see. But our game of the week, guys, is number 1, Sam Houston, at number 25, Central Arkansas. The rankings, of course, as of Sunday, September 19th. Yes, UCA may move up a little bit. Sam Houston undefeated at 2-0, UCA at 1-2, even though they've had some tough competition, losing to Missouri State and FBS squad. So here we go. Mr. Jamie Williams, number 1, Sam Houston, heading to Central Arkansas on the purple and gray stripes. How do you think this game plays out, my man? Score prediction as well.
I think we're actually looking at a really good game. I think we're looking probably at a lot of points. Jeez, I just looked at Kylor's name. I think we're looking at a lot of points.
The host can edit things. It's amazing.
About wow, just threw me way off. We're looking at a lot of good offense. 2 really good quarterbacks, probably 6, 7 really talented receivers, a couple of good running backs. Sam Houston does probably have a little bit better defense. However, they're playing on the stripes. Central Arkansas plays great on the stripes. I think they beat Sam Houston last time they played on the stripes. They're going to do it again.
Oh, he's going big.
That's right. The fighting Will Silers, 31-28.
31-28. If you're picking an upset as we go through this whole year, you better pick 31-28. It's the go-to.
That's
right.
All
right, Sam Houston getting upset. I am not as bold as you, Mr. Williams. as I've defended Sam Houston a little bit as they could still win a national championship. I'll take Sam Houston in a closer game, though, like they are on the road. So I'm going to predict one of those more Southland weird games where everyone's like, I guess they don't have good defense. And I'll take Sam Houston to win 38 to like 31. 38-31 Sam Houston in a good matchup. Our biased UC Davis admin, Mr. Neal, what do you think, my man? Game of the week.
Yeah, Sam Houston hasn't won the last 2 times they've been to Conroe. It seems like those stripes get them a little dizzy. I'm not positive. But again, this is a different type of beast of Sam Houston than we have seen in Conroe. I like you, Will Seiler. I think you're an awesome guy. I like the UCA fans. They came up to Cheney in the playoffs one time. All of our fans said just phenomenal things about, you guys. But I'm going to say Sam Houston, 38, UCA 24. I think Sam Houston wins comfortably by 2 possessions.
All righty. We'll see how it plays out for our game of the week. Lots of good matchups here going into week 4 as we hit conference play and the exciting part of FCS football. Gentlemen, it has hit that time where we are going to be rolling out. We thank all of our fans on FCS Fans Nation who are posting questions, comments, and conversations to drive this podcast. Make sure you check out FCS Fans Nation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and every other shameless plug platform. Myself, Mr. Jamie Williams, Kylor Neal, we appreciate your guys' support. On any platform you're listening to us now, make sure you toss us a like, a 5-star review if you feel that way, and make sure you leave us some ratings and remarks so we can make this podcast even better. So, gentlemen, we really appreciate you always joining me. Jamie, send us out with your thoughts on an exciting week 4 coming up. You excited for it, bud?
Oh, yes. Take a look down the schedule. There's some good games to watch out for all across the country. Don't just pay attention to the big 3. There's a couple of good Southern Conference games, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to another great week. We'll be back next week. A few teams have off, such as mine, so I can pay attention to everybody else.
Yes, make sure use that multicast on ESPN Plus and do not watch anything on Flow Sports. But make sure you continue to watch the FCS Fans Nation podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We'll be back with you after an exciting week 4. See you then.
Boom.
Boom.
Thank you for listening to the FCS Fans Nation podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your preferred listening platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, or even YouTube. And make sure to follow our FCS Fans Nation social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for listening to the premier podcast for FCS football. Boom.
Shut the door. Allison, I'm doing weird stuff in here.